Sometimes it's nice, no matter what the fee, no matter what the transfer, just sometimes it's nice to get one over your rivals. This is today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls. Another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is greatly appreciated. I don't know what's going on with StreamYard, but as you can see, for some reason the camera's fine, looks fine down here. I don't know what's going on. StreamYard's really getting on my nerves this week. Like really getting on my nerves this week. So we might be having a look at using Restream at some point just because of how poor this has been for us this week. And it's well, we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping that the chat box still works kind of in the same way. But at this point in time, we're having some kind of StreamYard is just not doing the job. It's just being really bad. You call the engineer again. It's nothing to do with engineers. Internet's fine. It's just the platform for some reason this week has just not been very good whatsoever. And I can't use OBS because we don't have like a chat box in the same way. So I can't click and do the memberships and all that stuff. So it needs to be something that's like integrated on the platform. Anyway, good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining me as usual. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. You are all really genuinely appreciated as usual for listening. And we will be jumping into the chat box, of course, for your questions in part two. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box, though. To Steve, to Chanor, we got Stevie and Brian and Peter, Darbash, Jose. Good morning to you, to Carrie Ann and Wayne. We got Temi, Jamil, Jerome, Brad, Loga, Hoodaguna. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for listening. Massively appreciate you. I'm just going to do a quick test. We have like a webcam as well on the laptop, and if I switch to that, that's clear. Why is that fine? Why is this fine? But for some reason, the other camera's not. Maybe it's the camera issue. Maybe we've got to reboot the camera. That might be what it is. But it says it's fine. I mean, if we just turn that down, we'll turn this slightly off or to the right. To be fair, none of that's really changing anything. So who knows? Who knows? Right, let's go through into today's story, shall we? We begin today's show by looking into Reiss Nelson. And of course, with Reiss Nelson, comes the news that Arsenal are indeed very interested in trying to, move some players on. That's what ultimately we want to see. We want to see Arsenal be able to move some players out the door, and we want to see them being able to bring players in as a result of that. But at this point in time, so far, Arsenal remain very much unable to do that because they've got quite a few players that they need to be able to move on at this point in time. But Reiss Nelson's value is obviously a bit of a problem because he spent the last half of last season out with a serious injury. And with only 2 years left on his contract, of course, it means that his value is at a very much a low point. So I know that a lot of people are going to be annoyed about this, but the reality is that Arsenal have very little choice, have very little wiggle room when it comes to a potential outgoing of Reiss Nelson. He needs probably the loan with an option or obligation with performance-related bonuses on top of that, integrated into that loan deal, because with that injury, there isn't really too many clubs that are looking to try and buy Reiss Nelson, and certainly not for any significant amount of money. With those 2 years left on his contract, Arsenal could afford to loan him out with a loan fee and, of course, potentially an option or an obligation to buy in that deal based upon those number of appearances that he might make for that club. But at this point, there is nobody coming in trying to buy Reiss Nelson because of the scenario that he finds himself in. He's also 25 years of age now. He's not the youngster that he was before. So Arsenal, difficult scenario, but Fulham, indeed, as I mentioned on the show a little while ago, have been interested and have been intrigued about potentially doing a deal with Arsenal to sign Nelson. That seems to be coming to the fore, as reported by Sammy Motbell yesterday. Arsenal have now agreed a 5-year contract with Ethan Nwaneri. That is the really positive news of yesterday. The news that he, of course, will be signing with the club for the foreseeable future, and that certainly Ethan Nwaneri continues with us is just such a positive outcome on all fronts, because there was, I think, at least some concern, some worry, some fear that Ethan Nwaneri might end up leaving Arsenal at some point in the near future because of pathways and minutes. And it's worth pointing out to you that he prioritised Arsenal from the start of these discussions. Was there interest from elsewhere? Yes. Was there ever discussions about the necessity of game time? No. His priority has been to stay at Arsenal and to choose Arsenal. And it was all about coming to an agreement eventually on that contract. Well, that has now happened. Arsenal have agreed that contract with Ethan Nwaneri, and he is set to sign with the club for a 5-year extension, of course, as well. So he'll be with the club until at least 2030. You'd imagine, of course, in 3 years' time, they will probably explore yet another extension for the youngster. But this is great news for Arsenal. I know there's been some reports about it being 4 years plus one as an option. I've personally only heard that it's a 5-year contract. Of course, 4 plus 1 is 5, but I haven't been able to guarantee that it is just 4 plus 1. I've just been told that it is a 5-year contract that Ethan Nwaneri has agreed to. So great news. 2030, Ethan Nwaneri, another announcement video coming our way in the near future. Exciting indeed. But a story that came out of the blue yesterday, Charlie White of The Sun reporting this initially, was that Arsenal are set to hijack Liverpool's move for Salford City's 17-year-old star striker, Will Wright. And that is a deal that is hoped now to go through. Liverpool had offered Salford around £100,000 plus add-ons for the 17-year-old forward. But Arsenal have made a move by more than doubling that offer and sending in an offer worth around £250,000 to try and get the youngster into their under-21s group. Now, you will remember, of course, that there has been significant, credible reports that Arsenal wants to improve the depth of the youngsters that are available in their group. They obviously agreed a deal with St Johnstone earlier on in the season for Callan Hamill, who, of course, is now joining Arsenal's under-21s group as well. But now they are making a move also for Will Wright, who will be joining the group too. They've signed a number of young players over the last couple of years, and the aim is, of course, to continue signing these young players also. So, yes, very good news on the front of the youth side. If you follow a lot of the youth football, Arsenal look to be getting a very exciting young player. He's done pretty well at youth level and has already made his senior debut for Salford City as well at just 16 years of age. Now 17 is Will Wright. So very, very hopeful that this deal can get done and that Arsenal's youngsters can add another quality talent to the team for the future as well. But lastly, the latest, of course, on Viktor Gyökeres. Ed Aarons, in his piece, of course, around that deal for Nwaneri, discussed the potential for this Viktor Gyökeres deal to be nearly done. That conclusions over a total deal for £68 million is expected to finally, eventually, end this long-awaited saga, and that the player will indeed become an Arsenal player. The price, of course, has been agreed in principle for a little while, but the discussion over add-ons, the discussion over the structure of the deal is what has been taking so long. It may be that some of these add-ons will increase slightly. Sporting have wanted those add-ons to be pretty much near guaranteed, but Arsenal seem to be coming to the end of this saga, because my goodness gracious me, has it taken a long time to get this deal done. It absolutely has. And hopefully we can get, I mean, I know a lot of people wait for, Fabrizio to say, here we go, and stuff like this to finally see an end to this. But at this point in time, there has not been a here we go for Gyökeres. But we're hoping that might happen soon, and that Arsenal will indeed be confirming this deal and getting him through the door very, 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 very soon. Just get it done, please. I can't be arsed with fans losing their minds and getting DMs all the time about Gyökeres. You'd be surprised. Actually, I don't think you would be surprised how often I'm getting DMs saying, "What's going on? Why is he not signed yet?" They're just negotiating the add-ons, guys. We're just getting this deal finally, eventually wrapped up. Right, let's go to part 2. Some of your questions and more right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of today's show. I might switch the camera because it's really irritating me, and I'm just having a quick check on the other platform just to check if indeed it's also lagging for you, and it is a little bit. So I'm just gonna. It's not going to be as good. It's going to be the camera I was using when I was away, but we're going to use this camera just for now, and we're going to use this camera just for part 2. So it's slightly different look because it's the webcam camera. Still not bad though. It's a pretty decent camera, but of course it's not the usual that you're at least used to anyway. So yes, I'm going to try and get that all sorted out for tomorrow. But StreamYard is really giving me jip. Right, let's jump into today's chat box, shall we, and tackle some of your questions and tackle some of your thoughts. If it is that you like and prefer this camera angle, maybe we just go with this forever. It might end up this ends up being slightly better than what we've been used to. Let's go though to Luke, who says, do you think Arsenal try to buy Eze for the going winger price, or does Palace aim to get the midfielders price? I mean, I think that Palace are going to end up trying to get this deal done for, well, we expect at least the 67.5 million pound release clause that is involved in the player's contract. That's what we're expecting them to try and do. And to be honest, we can't really blame them. We can't really blame them for trying to get the deal done at that figure. They don't have to sell the player. They don't have to do anything that they don't want to do. And, as a result, Arsenal, if they want him, are going to have to step up that money. Now, we expect, of course, Arsenal we expect them to have to sell somewhat before they can really commit to an outlay of that level on another player in this area. We know that we've got a number of players that have to be sold. Zinchenko, Lokonga, Reiss Nelson, as we've discussed, Fabio Vieira. These are all players, of course, that we need to move on. And we look forward, of course, to doing that. And then, of course, Eze will be able to be got. Rich says, big up chat. Same mistakes are happening. We can't sell players because the wages are too high and still no striker at the club. Arsenal takes all the excitement out of signing players. I mean, Rich, I think it's a little spoiled, mate. Arsenal have already signed, of course, the 3 players that got through the door. 2 are about to be confirmed, and the 6th is going to be Gyökeres all before pre-season starts. Sounds a little bit pessimistic on your end, Rich. I'm not going to lie. If this is the excitement being taken out of signing players, I think it's more to do with the dynamic and the environment of transfers just in the space in 2025. Social media gives us kind of this extra load of access we never used to have, and that's what's taken the excitement out of it. I personally think this is heading towards one of the most exciting transfer windows that we've ever had, and the hope is, of course, that we'll be able to do even more than we plan to do at this point. The players, of course, that Arsenal are trying to sell are not players that you're going to see move at this stage of the window, really. It's no surprise at all that these players have not left yet, because they aren't players that Arsenal are exactly seeing clubs full hand over fist to try and sign. And if they were, we probably want to keep them. So I think you're going a little overboard there, Rich. Lost Boy, thank you so much for the kind donation, who says, what's the chance we get both Eze and Rodrigo? 5%. It's always been very, very small, the chance that we get both of those players. So I don't expect both of those players to come in. Boy KA, who's dropped in a £10 or 10 SGD. I don't know what SGD is. What's SGD? SGD is Singapore dollar. It's dropped in 10 Singapore dollars, but has not left a message. So I'll keep an eye out for your comment, if indeed you leave one, SG. What was the name that I need to look out for? Boy KA540. If I look out for a comment, I'll make sure I read it out, because sometimes people click enter on the super chats before they've actually written out their comment, and I know how irritating that can be. So don't leave another super chat. Just if you leave another message, I'm sure I'll find it, and I'm sure the chat box will also point it out to me as well. Locus says, does this registering before Sunday mean that Eze will not be part of pre-season? It's unlikely that he would have been part of pre-season anyway. He only just got back to pre-season yesterday, so he might be able to play in the second or third friendly if they were able to sign him by that point. But having only just returned to pre-season yesterday, slightly delayed, he probably won't have been involved in the first friendly anyway. But Arsenal now with him back, I know there's been some Chelsea links as well with him back, and of course here training and getting up to speed for the new season, we expect probably the transfers around his future to accelerate. That's what we're expecting to happen. Benny played Arsenal, paid money for them. Let them announce them how they see fit. I just want to see them on the pitch. That is all that matters. Troy says, if Eze comes in, Trossard can go for me. Martinelli can still be useful. Christian says, hey, Tom, what role do you think Havertz will play next season? Is it likely to see him start as more of an 8? I think he'll play in a number of different roles. I still think that we'll see him in that centre-forward position at times. He'll come off the bench for Gyökeres at certain points of the campaign. He can play instead of Ødegaard, of course, as well. But yes, he absolutely could come on to play in those attacking midfield roles. He gives us so much depth in a number of positions, so many different options for us now to use if indeed the striker is signed, which we are expecting them to do. Hashtag Danny says, is Berta in charge of the women's scouting and youngsters scouting as well? Does he have someone under him to take care of these things? How does it work? I'm seeing a lot of movement, not only in the men's team. As far as I'm aware, no, not really. And Andrea Berta's responsibilities, unlike Edu's, I believe are far more focused on the men's team. I don't know how much of an influence, if any, he has really on the women's side, because you have the women's director of kind of the recruitment side of things, which is Claire Wheatley. She's in charge of a lot of the recruitment that goes on the women's team. That's why whenever you see kind of the signings made, there's always quotes from Claire on the website. So Claire Wheatley, I believe, has taken a real lead on that front. I think Andrea Berta is very much focused more so, if not solely, on the men's side of things. TG says, you just can't trust the media. One said Gyökeres could have had a medical on Friday. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of chaotic stories. There were some reports that, Morgan Gibbs-White would be having a medical at, Spurs days ago. Obviously, that's not happened because of the whole situation. But sometimes people just get different information, different stories spread, different stories are seen, and as a result, we get different outcomes. But I can understand why there is this frustration around the stories that spread, because everyone believes everything. The reports in Portugal that we had this week that the deal was close to collapse are the same reports that we had last week before, obviously, all those stories broke, with David Ornstein suggesting and reporting that the deal had been agreed in principle, just the structure and the finer details needed to be agreed. So, yeah, I understand people's frustrations with the reporting around these stories. And says, Tom, good morning. So Noni or Eze, if he comes to be the left winger next season, and we could go for a Leao or Rodrigo. Sorry, Anthony, you're going to end up getting disappointed, mate. I don't see Leao or Rodrigo. I don't personally want Leao. Rodrigo, if indeed he was being signed in addition to Eze, then sure thing. But Noni and Eze is what it's most likely to be between now and the end of the window. Anas says, what about Rodrigo? I heard the rumours that Arsenal will be bidding for him. I'd be very surprised if we sign Rodrigo this summer. Very, very surprised. It's not impossible, but it would be a real surprise for it to happen. I hope it does, in addition to Eze, but I'd be very surprised if it happens. Gunnar says, Arteta should go and tell Isak and Ekitike not to move. Arsenal or another big club to open the following season. I doubt that would happen in that way at all. But Arsenal aren't really in the market for either of those two players this summer. And boy, we finally found his message. He says, big up to you, Tom. Keep up the good work. Big fan from Singapore. Can't wait for the team to come over next week. For those, of course, that are in Singapore and Hong Kong, you're going to have a fantastic time. I'm sure. I hope that you've got tickets to the games. I hope you're going to be able to see players that maybe many of you, most of you, have obviously never been able to see in the flesh. So it'd be absolutely fantastic to see so many of you out there. And yeah, I'm gutted I can't go. I was going to be going, but I've got a wedding that I need to attend, and I can't go now. But I'm sure that you'll all have an amazing time. A man says, "Hey Tom, I was wondering what the usage is going to look like for Madueke. Could he potentially start on match day 1 on the left? Looking forward to seeing how this plays out." I still think that Martinelli will be our starter. I think Madueke will definitely get games on the left-hand side because he's not solely just going to get used as Saka's cover, but he will be used as a player that moves to the right-hand side when Saka isn't on the field. But Madueke is going to play plenty of games, certainly between now and the end of the season. I wouldn't expect to spend as much money as we have without giving him plenty of minutes on the field. But his primary reason for his signing is to be that cover for Saka. But he will play in other areas of the field as well. Amaral Gunner says, Tom Nelson allegedly on about £100,000 a week. So that's about $5 million a year. Why not just sell him and save the $5 million? Because that's just not how it's going to work. No club's going to come in and commit to him right now. He's just come off the back of a very serious injury on which he required surgery. The most likely development is that a team brings him in on loan. They take the wage responsibility away from Arsenal, and maybe there's an option or an obligation with performance-related clauses in it to get a deal done. But you're just not going to sell. It's so unrealistic. I really think people have got to be a bit more grounded with this one and recognize kind of the situation that Nelson is in. You're going to really struggle to sell him. It'd be such an impressive thing if Arsenal were able to sell it. So a loan is much more likely for Reiss Nelson this summer. Kingsley says, "Are we interested in Palhinha?" I don't think we will be. I don't think we'll be going for Palhinha. No, Arsenal have already got 2 defensive midfielders. I don't think they're going to be going in for Palhinha now. Vishal says, "Do you think we risk missing out on Eze if Liverpool let Diaz go? They'll also have to make up for the unfortunate and timely demise of Jota." Yeah, I think that Liverpool obviously are a team to watch when it comes to attacking players. That's why they're after Ekitike and Isak this summer, of course, as well. Do we have to worry about them? I think you have to be aware of their presence. But at the moment, Arsenal need to move some players on before we can make our move for some of our other attacking targets, if indeed we plan to do that. Trey Ab says, "It's what happens when you don't put the money down." Again, Trey, it's just not how it works, I'm afraid. Amira says, "Maybe Gyökeres isn't a fan of long-haul flights and is just waiting for the team to come back from Asia to be announced." That could be the thing. Ernest says, "Do you agree that Berta's next big challenge is to make us profitably a selling club?" I don't think Arsenal should be a selling club. No. Arsenal need to be a buying club. Arsenal need to be a club that are very good in the market. That means selling well, but a selling club, absolutely not. No chance. But we need to improve in the sales department still. We had a really good summer last year for sales, but our incomings weren't good enough. But our outgoings are really, really good. It's as simple as that. Wu-Tang says, "Tom, I'm sick of you keeping a cool head and being a kind, relatable guy. I need scorched earth, Arsenal anger, baby." I'm sorry, Wu, that I'm a disappointment for that matter. I'm not going to just lose my head and encourage others to do so, because this is just not a point in the season or a point in the summer to be angry or irritated. And if you are, I'm sorry. I feel for you. I do. I don't really understand why you are, but I feel for you. It's just not that point in the summer to be annoyed about anything. I told you at the end of the window, week of the first Premier League weekend, if there's still like glaring business that's needed, like the centre forward, like the wide player that we need, which looks to be being signed anyway with Madueke and Gyökeres, then you can be angry. But this is just not a point in time to be angry. Jamsey says, "Theory, do you think Arsenal need to do more to placate online fans, as the current online fan base will likely be the future match-going fan base? Online fans seem more volatile and harder to navigate." No, I don't think so, Jamsey. I think there's a recognition that the volatility of the online fan base makes up a very small proportion of the fan base. They seem bigger than they are because they're loud and attention-seeking, and it obviously grabs quite a bit of attention. And we can do our job here to stay grounded and to be reasonable and to explain things in a calm manner, because that's just what it is. But I get that anger sells. I get that shouting and screaming sells and it draws attention. I get it. But Arsenal don't really need to do more than they are. They already have systems in place to help deal with the abuse. And as a result, there was consequences for the person, of course, who abused Kai Havertz's family last season at that point of the campaign. If you want to go and read up on that, it's all available online to read. But yeah, the match-going fan base, if you go to the stadium, when Madueke's name is called, wait for that reaction. It will not be like the reaction that you've seen online. And that's just the reality of the match-going fan aspects these days. The portion of those that, I mean, there was that video, I think, of that guy that walked out on the last day of last season when Arteta's speech started. I think he was one of, like, I think it was 0.something% of people that followed suit. It was a really embarrassing moment for them. James says, with the Champions League and the Club World Cup prize money levels, are we getting closer to returning to having huge disparities between clubs financially effectively counteracting the intentions of FFP? Definitely a good question, James. And the money that is secured from competing into the latter stages of those tournaments will help clubs, of course, to combat FFP, but it's more so UEFA's financial fair play regulations that are the more restricting. That's certainly the more restricting kind of restrictions that are in place, you know. So I guess it's a fair point, and I think those clubs that do win those tournaments will be more free to spend and then open that gap between themselves and others, I guess. But that's why you've got to try and spend smartly and carefully in the market, and not just buy players like Man United and Chelsea have in other years, you know, that have really damaged their compatibility as well. Burns says, we need Rodrigo, in my opinion, as next main target. Left wing is so important to us. If we don't get him, our rivals will sign him and will be our biggest mistake. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. Eze, for me, is a much more important signing than Rodrigo is. I just don't see it happening. Kingsley says, I understand, but I think he would be nice for squad depth. Who's that? Who is it that would be nice for squad depth, Kingsley? That's what I'm curious to know. We'll try and find that comment. And he says, hi, Tom. Do agents have a say in the announcements? There must be an agreed time a new signing gets in before another signing is then announced. I mean, there might be like clauses in contracts and certain agreements about the announcements, but it's not really something the agents are too involved in. To my knowledge, that their main job is kind of the negotiation of the deal itself rather than the media side of the announcement. Eamon says, what is the actual situation with tapping up? We have heard multiple stories of Arsenal talking to players but not talking to clubs. Is this not against the rules? Again, it's a really good question, Eamon. And I always point people in the direction of James McNicholas's Gunner Blog's video on how transfers work. Is it legal is it within the boundaries of the rules to speak to players before having had that club-to-club contact? Not really, but it's done by everybody. Like, it's one of those things it's one of those rules that everyone kind of breaks. Clubs do speak to players before making official moves because they have to kind of gauge the interest of the player and the interest of what a potential fee might look like and what the wage structure might look like before they make a move and not waste their time. So it's one of those things where unofficially stuff goes on all the time. But I recommend going and watching James's video. He explains it a lot better than I can. Luke says, Tom, my EAFC GM save, I got Gyökeres, Hato, Rodrigo, Eze, Norgard, Mosquera, Noni Madueke, and Arda Güler. No excuse. Berta and Edu out. Berta, Edu, and Arteta out. Still getting Edu out. He's already left, but still Edu out. Definitely the way forwards. A man says, Tom, Madrid question. Do you see Vinicius potentially moving from Madrid? I feel that it's difficult to both him and Mbappe effectively given their tendencies. I mean, Mbappe plays, through the middle. Vinicius is on the left. I'd be surprised if either one of those left as well. Amorogana says, Tom, you can't talk directly to players, but can to their agents. Again, you can't, but it happens. So, again, it's lots of things unofficially. All go down. Phone calls are made between clubs, executives, managers, players, agents. It all happens. It's a murky world, is the world of transfers. So you're right. You shouldn't. You can't. Because every club does it, rarely do clubs complain. I know we've seen this whole Morgan Gibbs Wright Morgan Gibbs White situation, and the drama there. But yeah, as I said, go and watch that video that James does. He explains it very, very well. It happens, even though it's not meant to. So Wilson says, do you think that it's wise for Arsenal to possibly wait towards the end of the window? I mean, they don't really have a choice, Wilson, but to wait right now, because they've already committed a huge amount of money on players. They haven't sold any. They need to move players out for just squad reasons as well as monetary reasons. They want to work within the restrictions of UEFA financial fair play, which after committing with a deal for Gyökeres, potentially upwards of £200 million on players, and nothing yet having come in, they absolutely have to. The difference between that and, say, Liverpool last season, Liverpool's only spent £12 million last summer. Arsenal spent around, I think it was 31 million with Mikel Merino and 42 million they committed to with Calafiori. I think there was some other deals done as well that obviously meant that kind of the fees of other players of previous summers came out too. So yeah, it's not about a choice to wait. It's they have to wait. There's a pressure on them to move players on first before making other moves in the window. So we're going to have to wait and see. Chino says, Tom, do you think we can get Rodrigo? If not, only if players are moved on and only if they don't sign Eze. I'd be very surprised if they could get both. I'm not going to say never, but I'd be very, very surprised if they could sign both players in this window, even if they moved on a Trossard, for instance. I think to get Rodrigo and Eze, you'd have to sell Martinelli for a lot of money and also the other players as well. I'm not sure that Trossard's sale would enable Arsenal to get Eze and Rodrigo. I think Eze would become the effective replacement for Trossard in that case. Let's go to Edubia. Yes, Edubia says, Tom, why does the payment structure for transfers seem to be so important for Arsenal compared to other clubs? How are transfers actually financed? I think it's a psychological thing for us Arsenal fans. They are important for every single club, but we follow Arsenal so closely. We follow every single story, every single turn of each transfer news piece. We follow every single update. And we know that structurally transfers are agreed in different ways, and they are done so for loads of clubs. Chelsea in particular have a huge focus on how transfers and the structure of those financial deals are made up. But because we are so switched on for Arsenal as fans, it makes it feel like that we're the only ones that do it. But in reality, loads of clubs do it. So it's not just us. There is a focus on structures for all clubs, not just Arsenal, but we psychologically kind of feel that it is just kind of us that does it, but it's not. It's everybody. Dan, thank you for the kind donation. Hey, Tom, what percentage would you give the signing of Eze? Probably 50-50 at this point. As I said, it really does depend upon some of the outgoings between now and the end of the window. I keep looking at this camera, not this camera. That's probably you've got two cameras in front of you. But yeah, I think there's a much bigger likelihood that he obviously arrives than Rodrigo. But yeah, I'm saying 50-50 on Eze. Maybe more than that. Maybe like 60, 65. A little bit. I was higher than that. I was like 80. But I think obviously seeing particularly still what needs to be done outgoings wise, that's dropped a bit to like 60, 65. I'm probably like, yeah, more than 50-50. Bailey says, Eze and Gordon, imagine who this could also be for the international team, the chemistry translating from club to country as well. Ontong Soup says, I wonder how often full transfer fees are paid up front. Not often at all. No, not often at all. Only usually in like release clauses where you have to pay the fees up front. Sometimes clubs do demand big upfront fees for players, but it's mainly structured. And even then you get amortization, of course, which is how it looks on the accounting books where you have a 5-year contract and you pay 50 million quid, that amortizes to 10 million every year across that 5-year contract. So there's even more depth to it than we're aware of. Bacon Fang says you would have to question any club if they did not watch the books, so to speak. Exactly, yeah. We have to be aware of what we're spending and what our outlay is and what's coming in. If we don't do that, we're going to be caught out. We're going to look a bit silly if we don't do that. Roy says, Tom, when does the club receive prize money from the Champions League? Would the timing affect when or what business can be done? This is a really good question, and I don't know the exact date, when the money comes in. You imagine that it would come in kind of at the completion of the tournament, at the end of a season, that whatever you've won at the end of that season comes in gradually. But you gain, if you get eliminated from the FA Cup, I believed it was that you get the money at that point that you're eliminated. So if you win the tournament, you get your FA Cup winnings at the end of that tournament. If you get knocked out of the Champions League in the semi-finals, the money is then, it comes in that prize money at that point. That's my assumption. I don't know that for a fact, but that would be how I would believe that it works. Zero says, Arsenal rejoicing over a possible hijack for Wright, but really quiet about Rodrigo's. I mean, there is no, that's not a thing at the moment. It might be, it might happen, but at the moment, that's not something that's on the cards. Liverpool have been linked to Rodrigo as much as Arsenal have, and it's not a deal that is on the cards right now. Sally says, are we the fans driving this PSR regulation more than the club, who actually knows the threshold for which we are supposed not to go over? We spent 75 million last summer and sold Eddie and Smith Rowe and Ramsdale, of course, as well. We had pretty much a net zero summer last year, but there were some, obviously there were outlays compared to Liverpool, though, who didn't really spend anything. The club know it's not PSR either. It's, as I say, it's UEFA FFP. That's the one that's the main one. Arsenal have spent a huge sum of money. They now need to move some players on. We know that because that's just, we've been told, sources are letting us know that. So that's where we're at in regards to kind of the restriction side of things. And that says, I don't think Norgard is that good like Partey. I mean, he's not coming in to replace Partey, Norgard. Norgard is coming in to replace Jorginho, and Zubimendi is the Partey replacement. Amberley says, these moaners are doing my head in. Some are just never... Some people are never happy. And some people are just caricatures. They're characters. They don't really believe what they're saying. They just make it up and just like to be a little bit chaotic and to try and rile people like you who've just got annoyed at people being moany, and it shows that it works. So you stop giving them the attention and stop kind of, reacting in a way to it, then I guess it would stop. But also, we don't ignore it all, because there are some things that need to be called out, and we always do call it out when it needs to be called out. Anton says, spending 55 million on Noni Madueke before Rodrigo is available is a bit like stopping off at KFC before going to a dinner party. Doesn't actually sound that bad of an idea, Anton. You must go to some fancy dinner parties. But as I have explained before, the spending of money on Noni Madueke is nothing to do with the move for Rodrigo. The right-wing depth cover was Arsenal's priority over before they signed a left-sided player. So they were always going to spend money on that position, and it was always going to be a significant amount of money. It also was not £55 million. It's 48.5 million initial fee, structured with 3.5 million add-ons, taking it to £52 million. So it's worth getting the accuracy of your reporting right when doing fees. Maximius says, Tom, have you heard the report that Newcastle may be offering Gordon to Arsenal? How would that change our transfer dynamics? Well, you'd imagine that at this point in time, if they signed Gordon, a deal for Eze would be very difficult then to do. As I said before, the idea of Arsenal adding 4 attacking signings this summer was always a dream, a possibility, but never the likelihood. 3 was always what they wanted, and that's what they'll aim to do between now and the end of the window. So Gordon coming in would be great. I'd love Gordon. I think he's a really good player. I think he would add a lot to Arsenal's left-hand side, a lot more threat, a lot more directness. His character's an interesting one as well. So there's a lot to like about Anthony Gordon as a player. And says, Tom, the fact that we will miss out on Rodrigo and only get Eze, I'm disappointed. We always seem to be 1 or 2 short of what happened to the Champions League money. The owners pocketed it. Again, Anthony, this isn't true. And I find myself constantly having to say things to you and others about things that aren't true. Arsenal at the moment are on course to spend more money than they have ever spent in a single summer transfer window. And that means going well over £200 million, a lot over £200 million, potentially to get Eze on top of what we've already spent and what we intend to spend with Gyökeres. It means signing 3 players that are going into the starting 11. If you think we're 1 or 2 players short, that's obviously subjective. But the fact of the matter is Arsenal still have 2 left wingers already at the club that at the moment aren't going anywhere unless something changes. Martinelli and Trossard are here. It means having Gyökeres and Havertz as your centre forwards. It means having Saka and Madueke as your right-sided players. It means having Eze and Nwaneri and Odegaard as your attacking midfielders. It means having Zubimendi and Rice and Mikel Merino and Norgard as your potential midfield options to play in the 6 and the 8 roles. It means, of course, having a really strong defensive lineup of having Luis Skelly and Calafiori, Gabriel and Kivior, Saliba and Mosquera, White and Timber, and Raya and Kepa as your goalkeepers. It means 2 players in every single position, sometimes 3, not to mentioning, of course, some of the other young players that hopefully will be making their breakthrough into the side next season. I think I've probably forgotten some others as well in this team that obviously are going to be, we hope at least, having some kind of impact on the squad next season. And Arsenal might not yet be done in that regard. Gabriel Jesus is still yet to come back from injury, of course, at the end of this year to add another attacking option to our team as well. So this idea of being 1 or 2 short, I'm sorry, but that doesn't add up, even if we only sign 1 more player. And no, they're not pocketing the money. The money is being spent. And you can see that by this potentially record-breaking spending window. So I know you want Rodrigo and Leao and all these players, and not signing players that you want is annoying for you, but the reality is that Arsenal already have 2 left wingers, and the only way that Arsenal were going to go and get another left winger was if one of those 2 players left. And so far, they're not leaving. And until that changes, it's not going to happen. So that's how it's explained. That's how it works. That's what it is, So until that changes, this isn't going to change. Gary says Gordon is not an upgrade on Martinelli. I don't know. I think he probably is. I think Anthony Gordon probably is an upgrade on Martinelli, not like massive, and I think that says a lot about. Martinelli, more so than it does Gordon. I think he's a slight. I don't think it's a massive upgrade, but I think him and Martinelli are 2 really good options. He's definitely for me an upgrade on Trossard. So having Martinelli and Gordon is better than having Martinelli and Trossard, in my opinion. Tunde says, Tom, where are the fans that were saying that we're slow in the window? Man United are buying players. How many players have Man United bought now? Yeah, I think they've got Cunha and that's it. Is that right? I think they've only signed Cunha. And I think Man United were being used quite a lot as an example of doing business quickly at the beginning of the window. And they were like, they've signed Cunha. Why haven't Arsenal signed anyone? Arsenal have now signed 3 players. 4 and 5 are coming in to be announced very soon. And a 6 in Gyökeres is also expected. And then maybe we'll get a 7th between now and the end of the window. But yeah, you're right, Tunde. It's just the hysteria, of the fans sometimes. Ishi says, Tom, are we not right to want a 4th attacker considering our previous non-existent transfer windows previously? Well, as I've explained, Ishi, we've got 2 players in every single one of those front 3 positions if we add Gyökeres and Madueke, which are expected to happen. We've got 3 attacking midfield options on top of that. We've got Jesus coming back, who adds another option to the forward line at the end of the year. And of course, at this moment in time, when you haven't sold one of Martinelli or Trossard, you're not going to add another player. It's just not going to happen realistically. This isn't a video game. I know people hate that description, but I'm sorry, that's the best analogy I've got. We can't stockpile that number of attacking players. One would have to go. And that in itself is not down to Arsenal to make that happen. A club has to come in with what is believed to be a reasonable offer for those players, because we have to be better at selling. And we have to get good fees for our players. You can't just sell a player for pittance just because we want to move one out. And it says, Tom, I would rather lose Trossard or Martinelli and bring Gordon, reinvent the squad. I personally would be open to seeing Trossard move on and Gordon coming in. But until that happens, until a club comes in for him, we can't do that. That's the situation. LMS is, if we get Gyökeres and Eze on top of the signings that we have, you have to be happy with that. And I absolutely agree. You have to be happy with that. Anton says, Liverpool think this is a video game. Well, let's have a look at Liverpool's options. Obviously, very sadly, they've lost Diogo Jota. And as a result of that, they are responding by these moves for Isak/Ekitike as a result. Darwin Nunez has not left yet, nor does he look like leaving at the moment, despite that interest from Napoli, because they can't seemingly afford his price tag. Luis Diaz has not left yet, and they don't want to sell him, despite the fact that Bayern Munich are interested, Barcelona are interested. At the moment, they're not going anywhere. Harvey Elliott wants to leave Liverpool this summer as well, like Diaz does. And that means that you're in a situation where you've got Salah, Gakpo, Darwin Nunez, potentially an Ekitike to replace a Jota. You've got Florian Wirtz, of course, who can play maybe as a false 9, can also play in a wide area, but he's mainly an attacking midfielder. And Diaz. And that's the 6 at the moment. Am I forgetting anyone? They got Chiesa, who doesn't play. But obviously, you can kind of compare him to the Gabriel Jesus number 7, if you like. But Elliott's going to be off. At the moment, they've not signed Ekitike, of course. And yet, at this point in time, we could even see Elliott and Diaz and Darwin Núñez all leave still. So the Liverpool example doesn't really work. If you look at the options they had last season, they had Salah and Elliott, they had Darwin Núñez and Gakpo, and they had Diaz and Jota, with Chiesa as kind of an option that was never used. So there was 6.5. And Arsenal last season, we didn't have 6.5. We didn't have enough attacking players. This season, we're going in with 6 options with, of course, potentially Eze and potentially Jesus back at the end of the year as well. So you might even have 8 come the end of the season, ironically, as well. That's without signing, a Rodrigo on top of an Eze, of course, as well. And the renewals are also very important, says Gunny Gooner. Yeah, MLS, Nwaneri now, Gabriel, all really important business that Arsenal have done this window. Gary says Napoli not taking Núñez now because they have signed a player on loan. Couldn't come to an agreement on Núñez, but may go late for him. Ishi says we should have got rid of Jesus, Zinchenko, Havertz, Trossard, Vieira, Nelson. We've evolved past the disappointment from most, waiting on Jesus to do what he's already doing. Well, I mean, Havertz is ridiculously included there. Trossard, of course, has been a really key player for us over the last 2 seasons. You just look at his returns over the last 2 seasons to see that. Vieira was on loan last season. Nelson was on loan last season. Zinchenko is hopefully going to be sold this summer. And Jesus, we would have sold this summer, of course, but he's been injured. So we can't sell him this summer. But he'll be sold, of course, I imagine, in the not-so-distant future. Andrew says, mustn't sell Martinelli. It's too dangerous to have. Too much turnover with all these new additions. Chemistry of effort, character, and familiarity of styles must also remain. And this is a really important point. If you bring in too many players in a single window, you can argue that you could potentially have some issues there. Now, I don't think at the moment that can be an argument. I think if you bring in 6, 7, I think we're all right. If you start bringing in 8, 9, 10, then maybe that's more of an argument. But at this point in time, I don't think you can sit there and say this team needs to gel, because we needed this many players. We needed 5 or 6, potentially 7. We need them to deliver. And you won't see me talking about, 3 months' time, well, this team needs time to gel. You won't see me saying that then, because I don't think it's appropriate to be talking about that when we know that we've needed this many players. But he says, no point saying you'd take ... over Madueke. The deal's done, so time moves on, and the focus is now on other deals. Anson says, has Saka signed a new contract yet? It's gone awfully quiet. He's in the negotiations are ongoing. Arsenal's focus at the moment is on doing those other deals right now. They're very calm on Saliba and Saka, so the focus is on the transfer window right now. Inspired Challenge says they just like moaning. Some people do just like moaning. Some people just feel that there is a compelling nature to have to complain about something. I get that exists. I get that some people are that way inclined. I look at it from the perspective of making sense of what's going on. I'm fortunate that I have a little bit of inside info as to what goes on as well, and that definitely helps. But it stuns me that there's this much irritation from fans in this particular window with what Arsenal are doing, what they continue to do, what they still aim to do. It stuns me that people are still irritated. I think it's just the social media brain melt, to be honest. I really do. People's brains have been melted by transfer window updates every single day. And I am a problem in that. We produce shows every single day. It's my job. But yeah, I think that in some ways, and having so much information, so much of the time, and also a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of opinions that sadly misguide people and mislead people and misinform people, also, of course, doesn't help. Doesn't help one at all. Gunnar says, you don't hear Liverpool say, let's sell Gakpo, Diaz, or previously Jota, because they need a winger. Liverpool adds, they don't tend to swap. Andrew says, who have we bought that improves us? Zubimendi, Gyökeres, and of course, Madueke certainly improves the options we've got on the right. Had we have had Madueke last season, for instance, when Saka was injured, we would have been far better prepared for that eventuality. I think Norgard is going to be better for us than what Jorginho was offering us for next season. Certainly, Jorginho's status at the end of last season could barely move. So Norgard's certainly going to be offering us penalty. We had no depth for Saliba's position at all. So Mosquera is definitely going to help with that, and that's really important. So broadly, we've got more depth. And if we can add Eze to this team on top of that as well, then my goodness me, we've potentially got a player that can start in our front three. We've got a player that can potentially push Ødegaard, maybe even push him onto the bench at times. So without a doubt, Andrew, a lot of work is being done to improve this team. Anna says, Tom, as an Arsenal fan, I should not say this, but what will happen if Arsenal bottle the league after buying so many players? Then who should be blamed? Well, you can only bottle something, of course, if you've got a significant lead in the first place. It's worth pointing out. And of course, next season, Liverpool are without a doubt the favourites for this team, for this league. City being the second favourites, Arsenal being the third favourites for the league. And we're not the only team that's signing players. Liverpool have spent huge amounts of money. Liverpool could rival Arsenal for the amount of money they spend during this window. Manchester City have already signed, a lot of players and intend, I imagine, maybe to spend a little bit more between now and the end of the window, of course, as well. So, and Chelsea, you can't count them out on what they've done. I'm not too worried about Chelsea, really, but they've spent a lot of money and they continue to look like they will continue to spend more money. So, that's it. Let's go. The pessimism never ends, says Spearmint. No, some people just love being pessimistic. Charles says, I'm realistic. I know we won't win the league or the Champions League, but we are good enough to win a domestic cup next season. We're good enough to win a league or a Champions League next season too, Charles. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're not good enough to do that because the squad that Arsenal have is a good enough squad. They got the Champions League semi-finals last season with a depleted team. They smashed Real Madrid 5-1 with so many key players absent for us. So we are good enough to win those competitions. We are good enough. We should have beaten PSG, in my opinion. We made the mistake in the first point of that first leg, and we missed our chances at the start of the second leg. We should have gone to the Champions League final, in my opinion, last season. We didn't do that. We've got a significant number of semi-finals, and we need to take that next step. We have finished 2 points off the Premier League champions in the season before last. And maybe if we'd have had our best players available last season when they were stolen from us, or at least been more proactive in the market in 2024, who knows? Maybe we would have done even more. But to say that it's not realistic to think that Arsenal can't win the league. I'm on the view that it is realistic to think Arsenal can win the league. And I think Arsenal have a good enough team to win the league as is. That's before we go out and potentially add an Eze to it between now and the end of the window. Let's go to Not Too Busy says, yes, but City have done little to fix their defensive weaknesses. Very good point. Callum says, is it reliable that Viktor is having a medical tomorrow? Is that just a rumour? I haven't heard that myself. It's not to say that it won't happen. All that needs to happen for Gyökeres to have a medical is for this final bit of the deal that is being negotiated to be agreed. Once that's there and done, then the medical will happen. If they agree that today, then sure, he could have a medical tomorrow. But that, I think, is a little bit of guesswork more than being informed. But if it happens, if we finally get that agreement, we finally get that final, all terms are aligned, then a medical could happen tomorrow. But there's been no indication at this moment that is the case. Nick says, we're up there. We just need a good start to the season. So the pressure is on. Absolutely. Arsenal have got a really difficult start to the season. The fixtures that we've got are tough, but I don't see that as a negative. I see that as an opportunity. I see Arsenal's start to the season as an opportunity to get a leg up on our rivals, beat Man City, get a great result at Anfield. If you can do those things, you can put yourself in a really strong position really early on and make your rivals already start playing catch up. So that has to be our aim. It's a strong start. We can't be sitting here saying, oh, we had a really tough start. You can certainly sit there and say we've got some tough fixtures out the way and we've got an easier run towards the end of the campaign. But I don't want to be sitting there going, oh, we had a tough start. That's why we've only picked up 6 out of 15 points. No, Arsenal have got to take this opportunity at both hands. We're good enough to do that. We should be beating Man United away from home, even though we really struggle to do it on a consistent basis. We should be beating Leeds. We should be beating Newcastle and really turning around that kind of record that we've got there. We've got a really bad record there. We need to turn that around. Kieran says, Kieran says, your article the other day referenced Rodrigo's left wing and right wing stats. You listed goals and appearances and then said that he equated to goals and assists per 90. Is it goals and assists per appearance? So we talked a bit about this yesterday, Kieran. We talked about his minutes. Let me see if I can find the stats. Here we go. So per minute, on the right wing in his career, Rodrigo is getting a goal or an assist every 130 minutes. In his career playing on the left, he's getting a goal or an assist every 125, nearly 126 minutes. So it's around 4 minutes less. when playing on the left compared to when playing on the right. So I hope that brings you some clarity. Baker Fang says, well, Liverpool sold Coutinho and bought Van Dijk, etc. They have always had to sell, but this time it's been a few windows where they did not sign many, so they have had some funds to spend. Exactly. Inspired Channel says, imagine a fan base that this is moaning about a wage bill. The moaner in chief even did a whole stream talking about Arsenal's wage bill, and I was like, WTF? They must find something to moan about. Arsenal's wage bill is starting to get amongst the most expensive in world football, but that's because Arsenal are putting themselves into a bracket of the best clubs in world football. But even then, we've managed to get some players on really good wages, despite that fact. Despite that fact that we've still got one of the biggest wage bills in the country and in the world, it's because we're one of the most elite teams currently in the world, competing, of course, for the biggest of honours. So naturally, yes, of course, we have one of the highest wage bills on the planet as well. Is it any surprise that the team with the highest wage bill, PSG, won the Champions League? I don't think so. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Gary says, Tom, does Gyökeres go to do training programs at Colney, or does he join the Asia Tour late after medical is done? He'll join up with the squad as soon as he is signed. He will join the team as soon as all of this is done. He'll be keeping fit right now. He'll be doing his independent training plans with, I'm sure, a personal trainer of his and with a personal coach of his. But he'll be joining up with the team as soon as feasibly possible. Let's go to Emblem. We've only got a few minutes left, if that. We're going to be wrapping up in just a second. You can't do more than you win your games and then see what that gives you. If another club takes more points than you, then the team has done all you can. I mean, this window, Arsenal are not leaving themselves short. Arsenal this summer, if we can add an Eze to this, I mean, Eze is a bonus for me. You know, I said I wanted 6 players. I wanted 6 signings this window, but Arsenal might end up getting 7. And if we do that, amazing. And Arsenal, as I've just talked you through the squads, 2 players in every position, sometimes 3. If we've got that, we're in a really, really good position. You can only play 11 players on the pitch, and if we've got 2 players and plus some other youngsters, of course, we haven't even mentioned Dowman and some of the others that are coming through and some of the other youngsters that could get chances, then we're going to be in a really, really good place. Not to mention Gabriel Jesus, of course, coming back at the end of the year as well. Right, that's going to bring us to the end of today's show. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your Thursday. Make it through today, and you've hit the weekend. Friday's tomorrow. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Stay safe and well and happy and respectful and all the usual YouTube-y stuff. Drop a like, help us to reach 1K on the channel every single day. We try and do it each day. And if you're new, welcome. Subscribe. We're here, as I say, every day. See you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.